He was abused and molested as a child, which led to countless years of mental health issues, which culminated in a suicide attempt. He's now a TEDx speaker, and he dedicates his life to saving animals. He's coming up to tell a story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by Colonial Metals Group. You can set up a safe and secure self-directed IRA where you can have access to your assets no matter what. Protect your future with gold and silver. Call Paul and his staff at Colonial Metals Group to learn how to get started. Call 800-898-1841. 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841, or go online to colonialmetalsgroup.com/LET Radio. Contact us from California. We have David Bartley on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. David, first of all, thank you for being a guest on the show, and thanks for talking about a topic that is really difficult for lots of people to talk about.
John, one, thank you for having me here, and two, you are very welcome. It is, and I'll be honest, there's a little bit of selfishness in this, in the sense that it's good for my soul, to be able to share it. So thank you.
And you're not the first to say that. A lot of people find, it's an overused phrase, but they find you can't resolve the past. You can't get rid of the past trauma, but we can use that as motivation for what we do today. Is that fair to say? Does it fit you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other part of it is that, I'm a freak about quotes. I love quotes. And there's a quote by Maya Angelou that says, "There is no greater agony than bearing the weight of an untold story."
Right.
So the fact that you are allowing me, brother, to share this, it is incredible. I mean, I would actually go so far as to say, my sharing with you today and your incredible audience, there will be positive physiological changes that literally happen in my body. I think it's that powerful.
I agree, too. It's a very cathartic. I just did an episode I had a guy on my show, and he was a retired detective, and he got involved in investigating sex crimes against children. We're going to talk about your case in a moment. I was on his show. He was on my show first. We talked about that. But during the interview on his show, we talked about, I didn't go through what he went through, but I had my own trauma from police work, and then it was about how, as a police officer, as a patrol officer, you handle things like that. And he wound up revealing a lot of things about his childhood. And I want to let people know right now, we're going to talk about things that are difficult. We have a lot of difficult conversations on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and David's story is no different. He was sexually abused as a child by someone that we should trust, a scoutmaster. Am I correct? You
are 100% right. And I was at the tender age of 12, and it was awful. It was horrific. And John, you know what was even evil doesn't even begin to describe it. Every time that he did these horrific things to me, before he would let me go, he would look me in the eye and literally say this: "David, what happened was an initiation, and all the boys go through it, but we don't talk about it." Right.
It's our little secret.
Yeah. And and I was just 12 years old, and and we know physiologically, neurologically, the brain is still developing, the soul is still developing at that point. And so that set me on a track of suffering. Really, I'm 61 years old. There are still aspects, John, of what happened to me 50 years ago that I still deal with.
Yeah, I can understand that. And look, I never went through this as a child or in my adult life. First of all, I don't remember being 12. I'm sure you do, because it was a different story for you. I never encountered this. I went to a Catholic boys' school for high school, never encountered that. Never had. Other people did. I did not. And we'll talk about some of that in a moment. But as an adult, here's what I found. I went through my own kind of traumatic, for lack of better words, and it had a profound impact on me. And one of the things that I had to learn to do, and I still do, I'm not the same guy I used to be when I was in my 20s, is I had to learn to accept that these things happen. I didn't say I approved them, didn't say I agree, doesn't mean I forgive. It means it happened, and it's part of me. Now, how do I move forward? Was that the case for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's interesting, and you know, everybody's response to trauma, like you said, John, is unique. What happened for me is I don't know exactly when, after the last time that it happened, that it became a repressed memory. So it just the question, you know, that I would imagine you will ask, and other people say, well, did you share it with your family? Well, one, I was raised in the 70s like you were, and when we were told, you know, yes, do this or don't do this, for the most part, we were pretty compliant. That's just kind of the way it was. So I didn't say anything, but then, John, I literally did not think about it again until I could tell you exactly, almost to the day, but certainly where I was when the memory came back. And I was 20 years old. I was a resident assistant at the college where I was going to school in Southern Maryland, where I grew up.
Get out, Southern Maryland. Did you grow up in Southern Maryland?
Well, I grew up in Silver Spring.
Okay, I grew up in St. Mary's County. I moved there when I was 18.
Shut up,
I'm
dude.
serious.
I went to St. Mary's College. Dude, I went to St. Mary's
We went to St. Mary's College to meet girls, and they never gave us the time of day. I'm telling you, it was the worst experience of my life.
I cannot believe that dude.
We could talk about the old. I lived in Tall Timbers and Piney Point, and
oh my gosh,
we would go down Oakwood Lodge and all the Green Door, all that stuff. But
oh my god,
it's a truly small world. And St. Mary's College is it's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful. As a matter of fact, that was the first capital of Maryland.
Yes, I can't believe that. I knew we were connected. I didn't realize it was this deep. So, so I'm an RA in St. Mary's, and I'm like 20 years old now. It's important to note, I'm then and now, I'm not a scary movie kind of guy, so like I didn't look at stuff. And what happened to me was terrible. So when the memory came up, I was confused. I'm like, what is this? You know, it's not like where would this influence come such that I would have the thought? And then over whatever period of time, I finally reconciled to my horror that like, oh dear God, this happened to me.
Right.
And so then, but I didn't tell. I mean, I didn't tell my mother until I was probably in my 40s.
A long time had passed between that incident, or say the incidents, the revelation in college, and when you finally told a loved one, which was your mom, and you were in your 40s at that point.
Yeah, and it just, and I think, and now concurrent with all this was really at the time that I was 12 was the onset of that depression.
Right.
I mean, like that's when it started. And so when I know I fought this thing for 50 years and I'm 61, I know when it started. And it goes back to what Maya Angelou said. And there's another quote that is so powerful. The quote is, "To not have your suffering recognized is an almost unspeakable form of violence."
That's so true. And here's another one to lay on you before we go to break, is that you can only traumatize me once, or you know, how many incidents are, but I can traumatize myself over and over and over and over again. And that is where the secret sauce is eventually I had to find a point to build a life that I wanted. When we return our conversation with David Bartley, we're going to talk more about the incident. We're going to talk about his progression through the depths of mental health illness, for lack of better words, and what he's done about it. You can find us on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Colonial Metals Group has helped me create a self-directed IRA where I can have direct access to my assets. Let the team of experts, Paul and his staff at Colonial Metals Group, help you protect your family's future, giving you great information for free. Their level of professionalism and ability to listen make it easy for you to learn everything you need to know about preserving all you work for. Call Paul and staff at Colonial Meadows Group, 800-898-1841, 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841, or go online to colonialmeadowsgroup.com/LET radio. Remember, let Paul and his staff at Colonial Meadows Group give you more information.
First thing in the morning on my phone, I join the Breakfast with Champions morning show in the Clubhouse social audio app. Both are free. I can grab my coffee, no makeup, no hair to do, and connect with people live from all across the world to jumpstart my day. Join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse social audio app.
Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Returning conversation with David Bartley on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. David is in California, and he was sexually abused by a scoutmaster multiple times as a child, which developed into some mental health issues, depression, other things that go along with it. PTSD is an issue that a lot of people use. I use PTSI. I think of more as an injury than a disorder. And it culminated in a suicide attempt I believe it was in his 40s. Before we went to break, David, you're talking about college and then coming to the repressed memories and then talking to your mom about it when you're in your 40s. I was never a big believer in repressed memories until I started talking from people, and then it started to make sense. When I say repressed memories, it means it just doesn't come to mind. And is there another way of putting it?
No, brother. You know what, John? That's exactly right. And and because I talk about, this is what I do now. As I share my story, as I like to say, from mental illness to mental wellness, it is in that period of time, which was roughly 8-9 years. I mean, Little John not only did, it wasn't even to the extent of like, I don't want to think about it. What it was is, it didn't even exist. Like, it wasn't even, does that make sense?
Yeah.
In the difference between the two? Yeah. And I think from both a neurological and I would say a spiritual standpoint, that was a gift. Because, a 12-year-old doesn't have the ability to process, the extent of what had happened. And I think, and I'm going to use God, I think God comes in and says, hey, you know what? We're going to have to just kind of put that down back in a corner and maybe bring it back up later for us to process
when you're better able to deal with that. I agree. And by the way, the brain can only store so much information, if you ask me. The older I get, the more I forget. And I'm okay with that.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Because some of the stuff, David, was not pleasant. And I don't have time in my life, and maybe you're not as old as me, but I had a friend recently who had a stroke. He wasn't even 60. He had a stroke and it killed him. Ooh. And that's not supposed to happen. Then another friend, he was in his late 70s. He had a stroke and he died as a result as well. Now, that is supposed to happen. But at my age, I start thinking, how much time do I have left? I don't know. I want to make the most of it. So do I want to sit there and think about things that are horrible and traumatic and depressing? Or do I want to do something positive in my life today?
No, I'm with you. Because you have to think, what is it, what's in it for me and what's in it for others in a particular circumstance.
Right.
So I agree with you. Because, I'm at 61, so I'm not that far behind you. But, life, with the big L, has become more, as a thought, is more finite than it was, say at 20 when it was infinite.
Well, when you're in college, the same age as college, I couldn't imagine. If you asked me at 18, exactly. What it's like to be 65, I'm like, are you kidding me? I couldn't imagine that.
Oh my gosh, no! That was like the age of my best friend's parents, who I adored. They were, it's like, God, I'll never be that old.
Right. And my wife, and I'll go back to your story in a moment. I call her name Stephanie. I call her the boss. She always says her big thing is she goes, I can't believe I'm married to someone on Medicare. I'm like, are you talking to me? Are you seriously talking to me? And there's no one else in the room. For once, she's not talking to the dog or the cats. She's talking to me.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. So I'm 20 years older than my beloved. So What Stephanie, what your sweetheart is saying is probably mine's probably going to say the same thing.
Right,
so,
right. And
thanks for giving me the heads up.
I'm glad you said that because, and by the way, the person that sexually abused David as a child was a scoutmaster, and we'll talk about that in a moment. That's someone you're supposed to be able to trust, and it's someone that we've since found out. And I know there's lots of stereotypes. Not everybody fits into that, but there's a lot of people that endear themselves and they make a purposeful purposeful action to get close to children and for devious purposes. And they did exist. And when I was that age, David, we didn't talk about it. We talked about the boogeyman down the street with the creepy van and the candy and the kids and the kittens and all that stuff. That's what we talked about. We didn't talk about scoutmasters and priests or babysitters or relatives. We didn't talk about those people at all.
No, and John, you're exactly right. Because and I think, I mean, you bring up a really good point. Thank you for doing. I hadn't thought about that. It's right. That never came up in conversation, and then it was exacerbated in the sense of me being silent by the fact when this thing told me that all the boys go through it. It's an initiation, and we don't talk about it.
Right.
So I didn't have the wherewithal. It's just kind of part of my personality anyway, to break out of that mold and be the one back then, to be the one to actually make an accusation. Can you imagine? Back then, John, when we were, for me to make an accusation against a scoutmaster of all things, I would have been called
you didn't call every name in the book. And I was going to ask you that the ramifications, the repercussions of telling on the attacker was not pleasant for children at that age back then.
No, it wasn't. They were all of a sudden, it became their fault. And it was just, and so, I just didn't do it. And I don't, I'll finish the thought. I don't even know, would it have done any good for me to have declared what had happened at 12 years old?
And I wonder back, you said it's a God thing. Maybe it was not the right time. Maybe it wasn't the right time for you.
Yeah, because I'm thinking maybe, I've never had this thought told now, but just such, your questions are so amazing that maybe that would have done more harm than good.
Yeah, maybe you weren't prepared for that. Maybe God said, this is not something you can handle. We're going to repress this memory. We're going to move on with other parts of life. And you mentioned your beloved, that how did this impact your ability to have relationships with other people?
Well, no, it was huge influence, and it's still, and here's how it does, and it's still an issue now. I have terrible body dysmorphia, and I have incredible embarrassment about that. I'm 61 years old, and I've done lots of therapy, incredible therapists and group support and all kinds of things. I hate my body. I hate to be naked.
I hate to break it to you, David. You're a 61-year-old man. I don't like the way I look either. I'm telling you.
No, I appreciate that, but I think it even goes beyond what would be "quote unquote" normal, if I may. But so it definitely to being intimate. Not as much when I was younger, but certainly the older I got, it was what happened to me as a child impacted relationships. Now, I was married to an amazing woman before who was nothing but extraordinary.
And we're going to take a short break, and we'll talk about that when we return. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Return our conversation with David Bartley. By the way, his website is davidwoodsbartley.com. We'll tell you more about that when we return. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Our sponsor, Colonial Metals Group, helped me with my goal of protecting my financial future. Being at the whim of the stock market or the current administration doesn't make me feel safe or secure, but having a self-directed IRA where I can safely store gold and silver, assets that have stood the test of time, no matter what the economy or government policies are, makes sense to me. Call Paul and his staff at Colonial Metals Group to get more information. Call 800-898-1841, 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841, or go online colonialmeadowsgroup.com/LET radio.
Breakfast with Champions is the tool I use in the morning to get myself ready to face the world. There is so much negativity as you move about your day from traffic to politics. The conversations are motivating and inspiring, and I can face the world with a positive attitude. So join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms. Download the Clubhouse app today for free and join us soon. Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Return our conversation with David Bartley on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. David was sexually abused as a child by a scoutmaster, and it had a profound effect on him. Repressed memories, depression, mental health issues, suicide attempt in his 40s. He and his spouse at the time got involved in end-of-life animal rescue, which I don't understand. He's a TEDx speaker, a motivational speaker. He focuses on suicide information and prevention, and his website is davidwoodsbartley.com. Last name spelled BARTLEY.com. David, before we went to break, you're talking about the impact this has had on your relationships with other people. And we talked to the body dysmorphia, or however you say that. That's right. One thing. But the thing I'm talking about was there was a point in my life when, granted, I was much younger than I am now, and it's like I had to look at all the past relationships I've been in. And a gentleman at the time that was helping me, he said, now, what's the common denominator in all these relationships? And I was going, oh, they're petite. They got brown hair. They got this. They got that. And he's like, yeah, maybe, yeah. That's not it. I don't think that's it. And finally, it took 3 days, and I realized the answer was the common denominator was me. I was in everyone's relationships. And I had to stop looking at why they failed, not because of what they did, because there's something flawed about me. And I say flawed, doesn't mean intentional, just it was not producing results I wanted. Was that the case with you?
Absolutely. No, if I look back at my relationship, my first wife with Deanna, incredible woman. And if I look at, there's so many things that, John, I wish I would have done differently. And I think absolutely that he was carrying a tremendous amount of, it's shame. And shame is, I don't know if there's any more corrosive emotion or corrosive material in the world than shame.
That's a tough one.
And it's just god awful, and all because of things that I made up about myself. There's a quote from Chef David Chang, who battles his own battle with depression, and he has this amazing quote that says, "When you're depressed, you're convinced that everything you think is true."
Mm-hmm.
And so people get into those spaces like me, and we make up all this stuff. But when then you get into the place of depression, you don't have you lose the ability to distinguish between what's that's really true or no, I'm making that up. And it's not that you're dumb, you haven't lost your mind, and you're still high functioning. That's how impactful this is. And so that really impacted my relationship with Dee. And but because she has such an incredible heart, I'm able to text her on a regular basis. I tell her I love her all the time. And my beloved now, Summer, it probably helps that she's a school psychologist. So she's got a great background in mental health, but she's also, it's hard for me. I don't know if I have the can find enough extraordinary adjectives to describe the depth of understanding that this particular soul has, in which she, because again, this depression thing, in fact, I dipped into a horrific place, John, at the end of last year of depression that I had, like the likes of which I had never been in before. It was that bad, which made no sense because I was doing all the things I was supposed to do.
That's the thing. That's the thing. And it doesn't make sense. And you said something earlier that I can really relate to. We got so much to talk about, and I know we'll get to some of it. You said shame is highly corrosive, and I immediately thought of this personal feeling. I don't know if someone else said this. One of the worst things I can do is be ashamed of myself, and that was horribly corrosive. And this selfish self-centeredness, where it's, I think I feel, I'm all wrapped up in my thoughts, and it's the opposite of looking through life with rose-colored glasses. You're looking through really distorted way of looking at things and have a distorted reaction to it.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, my beloved to the end of last year when I dipped into this just horrific depression, typed up a whole list of things that she said, honey, this is the truth of who you are. Not just affirmative statements, but the specific truths. And Dee and I never had kids, but Summer has 3 beautiful children who now I have 3 beautiful children. And my kids, they know what I suffer with, and they, John, are do the same sort of affirmative, supportive things like, no, David, this is who you are. And it just, to have that kind of, and I have 3 older brothers. The eldest did 42 years in the Army, by the way. I have these people who are constant reminders. They're reminding me of the truth of who I am, and I need that.
Right.
Because it's just, and I think we all do, really. I don't think we're meant to, and I don't think necessarily we're able to fight this thing on our own.
I don't think we can. And I have an old saying that, there's plenty of people, I'm sure, that would love to take a swing at me over the years. I don't have to be first in line, and I don't have to be beating myself up and doing all that stuff. And it sounds like you have come to some sort of idea where you agree with me. It's nice to have people say things about you that are positive, but at the time, I didn't believe it. You could say it all day long. It didn't make any difference to me.
You're 100% right. Exactly.
Because I didn't feel that way.
And, right. And see, and you know what, brother? You used the word right there that I think was so essential in what we're talking about today. It's you didn't feel. It's all about, it's feeling this thing.
I hate feelings, by the way.
I
couldn't tell. I hate them.
Yes, it's just feeling. It's tough. And I'm in a space of human beings that allow me to express those feelings and have taught me how to in ways that I didn't know. I had to learn. And there's, Summer in particular is so great at pointing something out. And a lot of times I'm in resistance to it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
No way. And then like, oh, wow. I think she's right.
I'm pretty good at digging in my heels, even at this ripe old age. But and here's something that I'm going to ask you as a question. I had to realize that, and sometimes I remind myself this, my wife, the boss, is on the same team as me. She's not going to lie to me. She's got my back all the time. And when she tells me I'm doing something that is counterproductive, I need to listen.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And, it's so funny that you say that because I had that. It's such a I won't say exact because we're all unique. Very, very close. Summer had pointed out 2 specific things. One, she was saying that, hey, I think you're driving lately. You're following too close behind people. I'm like, what are you talking about? Look, I'm 20 years older than you. I've been driving 20 years longer. And then I'm like, and like, oh wow, God, you know what? Actually, she's right.
Yeah.
Wow. But like you say, and I love the way you said it, brother, what, she's not going to point that out because she's on the opposite team.
Right.
It's just like, hey, honey, I don't want you to get in an accident,
And here's part of the scenario. When we come back from break, we'll talk about this. We'll do a deep dive in this. A big part of, and I tell people, granted, I have not gone through what David went through. I'm going to repeat that. So I'm not going to act like I know because I don't. But one of the problems I had as a very young man was the one-night stand things. And then there came a point in my life where I'm like, am I unlovable? Is there something about me people don't want me around for their picnic? Or that other part of the relationship that they don't want part of? And I had to address that. And here's the bugaboo we're going to talk about. I had a deep problem with fear. And it wasn't what we think of. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll return our conversation to David Bartley in a few moments. David was sexually abused as a child by a Scoutmaster. He went through mental health issues for decades, which culminated in a suicide attempt. He and his first spouse got into an end-of-life animal rescue sanctuary, which I don't understand. I'm a big rescue guy. He's a TEDx and motivational speaker focused on suicide information prevention. And his website is davidwoodsbartley.com. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Do you want to be a guest on Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast? It's really quite simple. And before you get into this notion that I'm not a cop, I wasn't a cop, I don't have something to contribute. Well, the show is about investigating crime. That's one aspect of it from the real life perspective of those who did it. And then it's also about trauma, how trauma impacted them, often crime-based, but not always. Our guests quite often are law enforcement officers, other first responders, military, victims of crime, their spouses or survivors, talking about how trauma impacted them, what happened, how it affected their lives, and how they rebuilt their lives after. If you want to be a guest, just contact me. It's really simple. Send an email to jay@letradio.com. That's jay@letradio.com. Or go to letradio.com and the Contact Us page, and you can get me right there as well. Return our conversation with David Bartley on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. David was sexually abused as a child. He was molested by a scoutmaster, which had a profound impact on him. He was 12 years old, and it went all through his adult life, culminating in a suicide attempt. He got involved in end-of-life animal rescue, which is depressing, a sanctuary that he and his first spouse had. He's currently a TEDx speaker, a motivational speaker. He focuses on suicide information and prevention. His website is davidwoodsbartley.com. David, I could have this conversation with you for hours. We could go back and forth. One of the things that I look back at my life now and I say there's certain, what's the old poem about the fork in the road, take the one less traveled, whatever it is, where people had said things at the time I found to be very annoying, but had profound impact on me, and they were life-changing. Did you go through something like that?
Yeah, and this happened not that long ago, John. And one thing I will say with you that the end of life rescue, it wasn't depressing. It wasn't. It was extraordinarily positive.
I've had so many dogs and cats, and they're wonderful. I love my dogs. I love my cats. It's countless great memories and one horrible one that I cannot get out of my mind a lot of times.
No, I get it. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
So anyway, in the work that I do now, I do work with lots of different organizations and a lot with the military. And so not long ago, I was working with an Army battalion, and a battalion is about 500 to 600 soldiers. And it's led by a colonel. So in this case, it was Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Trouse. And I had worked with his soldiers over the course of 3 days. And giving my base, we call it a brief in the Army. It's the why of suicide and the how of hope. And so in it, I talk about my experience of what happened to me as a scoutmaster. So at the end of these 3 days, Colonel Trouse says, "David, please come to my office." So of course I did. And he said, "David, I can't thank you enough for everything that you have shared and taught my soldiers, but I'm incredibly angry." And John, then I was of course confused. And he said, "David, I'm not angry at you." He said, "David, what happened to you as a Boy Scout, I can't process. I can't get over." He says, "David, I was an Eagle Scout."
Right.
He said, "David, the Scouts played an enormous role in my life. Who I am today as a colonel, as a father, as a husband, as a man, I learned as an Eagle Scout."
Mm-hmm.
And then John, he took his hand, he took out his wallet. And, of course, I'm confused. And then he pulls out, looks like a credit card. And he said, "David, when you become an Eagle Scout, they give you this." And he turned the card around, and it's the size of a credit card. He said, "David, this is an Eagle Scout card. If you talk to any Eagle Scout, they have their card. My card, I got this on November 3rd, 1998. I always have this with me." Held it in my hand, and I said, "Wow, so that's really extraordinary." And, John, I go to give the card back, and this extraordinary man says, "No, you keep it. You've earned it. So as I speak to you right now, brother, I'm holding that card in my hand. Like, that man gave me part of him because he wanted to try to take some of that hurt away. That's how powerful. That's a life-changing event. That one act. And I can't tell you how many speeches I've given in different places, and people come up to me at the end, and they're Eagle Scouts, and they show me their card. And they say, the fact he gave you that card, that was like giving you a piece of who he is. And I said, absolutely. And so that's what's, I share that in my talks because that's something that we can do when we find out that someone's suffering. That's an act of suicide prevention.
Yes, it is.
When we do something like that. And we all have access to be able to do things like that. And my platform is all about making suicide prevention doable. Like, to make it so simple and yet so powerful, and just by sharing these different stories. Because there's a quote that I base my steps on. It's by an amazing man, Dr. Drew Ramsey, who says this. And just check this out, John. Dr. Ramsey, who's a psychiatrist, he says this. Someone you see today is thinking about killing themselves. Your smile, your question, your love could save them. Trust me, they told me it did.
Look, I get that, and it's very similar to what I say. And I'm one of the worst when it comes to shopping, David, and I hate being in lines, but there's someone in that checkout line that's been through, you just don't know what. And if you take a moment and you listen to them, maybe we don't get a chance to meet them, but if we can listen to people's stories, a lot of times there's a lot of inspiration that they've come through really bad things. And you've come through some really bad things, and your journey's not over. That's okay. Hopefully you've got 20, 30 more years in you. I hope I have that in me too. That's a whole conversation. We could be the angry old guys on the front porch yelling, "Get off my yard, my lawn, kid."
But we're both in St. Mary's County. When we do that.
St. Mary's County with the rocking chairs. Oh my good! But our journey's not over, and I'm sure your journey's not over as well. So you had to make some conscious decisions, like you become a TEDx speaker, you do motivational speaking. You focus on suicide information and prevention. And by the way, even today, people are not hip about talking about that. They don't want to talk about suicide.
They don't.
And maybe it's fear, because if it could happen to you, it could happen to me.
Well, and I think, if I may, brother, the you know what the other thing is the belief, and I'm not making it wrong, but let me just please point this out, the belief that if we talk about it, it's going to encourage it. And it's actually just the opposite, because if we ignore it, what's going to happen?
Right.
And it go back to that's why Maya Angelou. There's no greater agony than bearing the weight of an untold story.
Look, let's talk about veterans. Let's talk about police with suicide.
Yes.
Police.
Yes, please.
It was an issue when I was a rookie. It was an issue in the 70s. Joseph Wambaugh wrote about it in the 60s and 70s. And he wrote it it's like being a psychological you-know-what heap. And eventually you become top of the heap. And you're the king you-know-what. And what happened to me, David, is, and I always say Sunday afternoons are the worst for me, because when I got nothing to look forward to, nothing to do, my mind oftentimes reverts to the past. And I get full of remorse over things in the past. And I revisit things in my head. Or not, I go to the future, and then I worry about what's heading my way.
No, brother, I totally get it. The one thing that my beloved now is really encouraging me to do is to develop a hobby, and I really don't have a hobby.
Join the club. Wow. This is my hobby.
Well, then thank God. You know what? I'm glad
I got radio and podcasting and social media, because I don't know what I do with myself at this point, David. What would I do?
Well, and John, I'm in the same space. So, and I like to do this. And the beautiful thing is, in the work that I do, when I go give a talk, and the talk that I shared, I just tell story after story after story after story after story. And here's where, if I may, I'll go back, where I'm able to honor the work that my former wife and I did, and really to honor her that most of the stories in my talks are animal stories from the animal sanctuary.
Right.
And you may think, well, how could you tell a story about an animal and have it relate to suicide or depression or mental illness? And like, you'd be surprised. You know what? If you want to know, have me come speak to your organization, and I will tell you, and you'll find out.
That's a great way of wrapping up. I've never had a dog that thought too much and was like, "Oh, I'm in a really bad space." They've never done that. They're always happy to see you. When I get home from the radio station, my dog will be thrilled to see me. The cats, not so much, but we'll hang out.
That's a whole other story.
You got a website is davidwoodsbartley.com. That's BARTLEY.com. Can people contact you, get more information about what you do? And I believe you got some TEDx speeches there as well.
I do. There's two. The first one was How Connection Saved My Life, and at the end of that is a story about a horse. And the second TEDx talk was How to Save a Life by Sitting Down, and right in the middle is the story about a dog.
And David, I want to thank you for your time and for telling the story. And one of the things you said that really impacted me was when people say, and I can't stand and say I understand, but when they say things like I'm trying to understand and I'm here for you, and that's what I got from a lot of your story. That people in your life said, I may not understand, but I'm here for you, and I want to understand. Again, David, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
John, thanks so much, brother, and thanks for what you're doing. God bless, brother.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.